Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Rising. I'm Krystal Ball.
And I'm Saagar Enjeti.
So we've got a new entrant into the Democratic primary, Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York. What are you looking at today?
Well, the President of the United States is unveiling a new immigration plan, so we have all that coming up for you on Rising. Welcome back, everybody. There is some trouble cooking up in the Middle East. Krystal, tell us what's going on.
Indeed. I'm looking this morning at ratcheting up tensions with Iran. And just to give a little bit of the context and the backstory here. So about a year ago, President Trump decided to take the U.S. out of that Iranian nuclear deal that was, of course, negotiated under the Obama administration. And the thought was that without the U.S. in, the thing would kind of fall apart, that the European allies involved would step away, that the Iranians would certainly not comply with the terms. And that's actually not what happened. Everybody else stayed within the deal, even though the U.S. left. Well, during that time, we continued to ratchet up pressure on Iran, and that pressure was ratcheted up even further with the addition of John Bolton to the national security team. Now we're in a position where we basically cut off Iran's ability to export any oil, which is the linchpin and backbone of their economy, and it's really hurt them a lot. So it really has increased the pressure there. Now today, we're in a place where first we had a carrier group moved into the region, so that sort of escalated tensions. We have some questions about potential Iranian threats against American interests, which have also been somewhat disputed by our allies, somewhat questioned by some of the folks here. Congress hasn't seen all of the relevant intelligence, so there are some questions around whether that Iranian threat to American interests, how significant that is. And that's caused a lot of infighting within this administration about how exactly to approach a potential Iranian threat and how to handle Iran in general now that we're out of this nuclear deal. Now, of course, the president disputes the reporting of the Times and the Washington Post that there is, in fact, administrative infighting. He tweeted, as he always does, "The fake news Washington Post and even more fake news New York Times are writing stories that there is infighting with respect to my strong policy in the Middle East. There is no infighting whatsoever." He also went on to tweet that he thought Iran would come to the table. Today, though, we're in a standoff. The rhetoric is escalating. Things are getting a little tense. Our allies and folks in the region are getting nervous. We pulled some of our staff from neighboring nearby Iraq. And my bottom line here is that we are, in fact, a lot less safe today than we were when we were following the terms and still committed to the Iranian nuclear deal. I mean, Saagar, if the end game here is to get Iran back to the table and negotiate a better deal, I think that's a fantasy. They've laid none of the groundwork to do that. And if the end game is what John Bolton wants, which is a military conflict and regime change, that is just an absolute disastrous approach that no one elected Donald Trump for and no one in the country wants.
Yeah, regime change is absolutely something that nobody wants. But I will say, so I've reviewed the reporting on whatever the intelligence was. What they said is that they saw missiles being loaded onto small boat attacks, which are controlled by the IRGC. Now, the IRGC is kind of like a little terrorist navy within, or a little terrorist army within Iran. It's the direct control of Ayatollah Khomeini. And that navy, I would point out, harassed U.S. sailors and U.S. ships for 2 years after the Iranian nuclear deal under President Obama, despite the fact that we were told that everything was sanguine and just fine. So what I would point out, and it hasn't happened under President Trump because he effectively said that he would blow them out of the water if it were to happen again.
There's worry. Supposed to make us feel better?
Well, yes. I mean, the
alternative
from the U.S. Navy was they were thinking that these boats could be easily filled up with bombs rammed into the side of a U.S. destroyer. That happened in the USS Cole terrorist attack.
Right.
$220 million in damage and 19 soldiers killed. So small boats are a big problem.
Right.
More what I would say is that whenever it comes to this Iran conflagration, you're right. Nobody wants war with Iran. We do want to drive the Iranians back to the table. Is this working or not? The Iranians like to talk big. They like to use whatever is at their disposal in order to ratchet things up, then ratchet things down. I don't know what their end game is. I do worry about a strategic misstep because the real problem that they have is that they don't have complete control over their militias.
Well, that's right. They have a lot of proxies that they're affiliated with that they don't have complete control over in Iran and in other places throughout the Middle East. And what I'm really nervous about is, do I think President Trump necessarily wants us to get in a conflict in the Middle East? No. Do I think that if he's backed in a corner where Bolton and others are beating the drums of war, Pompeo among them, he's also very hawkish, saying, we've been hit, we've been attacked, the threat is real, we've got to do something. You know, is he going to be the one to back down? It's hard for me to imagine that. So I'm getting a little nervous. But there's other big news afoot today. What are you looking at, Saagar?
That's right. So the president will be unveiling a new immigration plan. Now, to me, it seems like this is a meandering MAGA. And so what I mean by that is, what exactly does it mean to make America great again? To me, it seems that this is a broken promise. The president has promised over and over again to take dramatic action in order to lower legal immigrations and illegal immigrants in this country. Let's take a listen to what he said in the past.
No nation can allow itself to be overwhelmed by uncontrolled masses of people rushing their border. That's what's happening. They are rushing our border. They're coming up. And even before you get to the caravan, just on a daily basis, people coming in. And it's a very bad thing for our country. It's sad in many ways, but it's a very bad thing for a country. And again, costs us billions and billions and billions of dollars a year. And I will therefore take every lawful action at my disposal to address this crisis.
Now, this Trump-Kushner immigration plan, which will be revealed today, keeps legal immigration at current levels. All it does is change the composition of that legal immigration, shifting it towards a merit-based strategy. But what it doesn't address is the illegal immigration crisis at the border, and it doesn't address any of the illegal immigrants who are currently in the United States, and it doesn't address the DACA crisis. We have almost 2 million people who are in legal limbo. More what I'm getting at is that there's no enforcement whenever it comes to this towards this immigration crisis. And the bigger problem there is that that is what the president was elected on. Instead, he's going towards a more middle ground immigration policy, which is very reminiscent of the Gang of Eight. And I mean that because it's a strategic mistake. There is not a single part of U.S. immigration policy where there is any bipartisan consensus, Krystal. And so this plan has no chance.
This plan is a complete fantasy.
It's dead upon arrival. It betrays the promises that the president has made in terms of reducing legal and illegal immigration in this country. So I just don't understand the strategy behind this, beyond appealing his son-in-law who wants to make a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested, to your point. He managed to come up with a plan that absolutely no one wants, right? His base doesn't like it because it doesn't keep, the very hardline promises that he made and that the Stephen Millers of the world want to pursue. And if you're trying to get any kind of Democratic support here, you don't put DACA in it.
Right, exactly.
I mean, at least to throw a bone. Look, Democrats aren't going to get on board regardless, let's be honest. We also don't like that the changing from the family-based system to the merit-based system, which is going to disadvantage, it's going to change the composition. Basically, you're going to have fewer people from Central and South America coming without the family-based.
Well, not just that. I mean, almost 66%, two-thirds of the immigrants who come to this country come based on familial ties only. They don't come based on skill-based
Right,
system.
so we don't like that part, but not even putting DACA in. I mean, you're not
It's
serious.
more about political leverage, and that's what I meant by the strategic mistake. It's that you are sacrificing the things that you promised, giving and using no leverage in order to get that, and also not throwing the other side any sort of bone here. From what I understand from senior administration officials that I talked to on this, it's more about trying to unify the GOP behind an immigration message, but I don't see this holding.
That's so. And talk about Kushner and Stephen Miller and why it was Kushner that came up with the plan and not Stephen.
Well, what Kushner basically looked at is he said, he succeeded in the bipartisan consensus of criminal justice reform and said, can I hammer out a similar consensus on immigration? Now, there's a lot of hubris behind that because unlike criminal justice reform where everybody agreed that there was a problem, and universally agreed that we generally have a mass incarceration issue, there's only a small minority in Congress that doesn't believe that. In terms of immigration, it could not be the more opposite.
Right.
There is not a single tenet where everybody agrees. And so that's why trying to use the same strategy in this particular case is probably not going to work.
And how does the MAGA base feel about Kushner? Like, are they, I mean, is there a lot of awareness of him? Do they
I don't
like
think there's
him? Do they
general
trust
awareness.
him?
I think they just look at what the president is doing and say, what is this?
What's going on?
There's no excitement, and there's no enforcement, which is what he promised from day one.
Very interesting. Immigration fantasies coming to you later today. Next on Rising. Voices for Non-Opioid Choices is working to prevent opioid addiction and also increase awareness about pain management without the use of opioids.
The coalition of organizations launches a major effort today. We'll tell you more on the other side of the break as Rising continues.